So yeah, my girlfriend told me I'm temporary. Just dropped it mid-argument, casual voice like she was reading a weather update. I laughed. Actually laughed because I thought she was being dramatic again. She does this thing where she escalates, watches me react, then rewrites it later as a test. But this time, she didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She just said, "You won't understand now, but you'll see." Hung up and went offline for 8 hours. And I don't know why that felt like a funeral. I keep going over the call line by line. She said I never make her feel better, that I'm one of those people who pretend to care until they find someone better. But then like 2 minutes later, she said I'm the only one who ever really saw her. Which is it? The switch in her voice, it wasn't anger, it was certainty. Like she'd already decided that I was guilty of something I didn't do. The weird part is the day before that call, she sent me a picture of the necklace I got her for our anniversary. She wrote, "Still wear it when I need to remember who's real." How do you go from that to "you're temporary"? When we first started dating, she said she had trust issues because of her mom. Her mom's the kind of person who says, "I'm proud of you," right after reminding you what you could have done better. And every time they argue, my girlfriend calls me crying, saying she wishes she could disappear. And I always show up, no matter how late, no matter what. I've been that guy sitting in her driveway at 1 a.m., headlights off, just waiting for her to text, "Okay, you can come in now." She used to call me her safe place. Now I feel like the crash site. I told my friend Dylan about it today, and he said something that's been rotting in my brain since. Bro, sometimes people push you away when they're guilty. And I hate how much that fits. We've been together since we were 17, survived high school drama, 2 near breakups, and the long-distance thing when she went to college first. We used to text each other stupid affirmations like, "Don't let the world make you mean." Now she calls me controlling for asking if I'm okay. The first real fight we ever had was about a party. She said she wanted to go with her friends. I said, "Sure." Next morning, she sent a one-word text, "Home." I called her, she didn't answer. 6 hours later, she said she'd lost her phone, but something about her tone didn't sound right. When I asked what happened, she said, "Don't ruin good nights by overthinking." Back then, I thought that was maturity. Now, I think it was practice. I saw something last week that I can't stop thinking about. We were sitting at her kitchen counter and her mom walked in and said, "So, is that the one you're still with?" Still with. And my girlfriend just laughed. Not the good kind of laugh, the performative one she does when she wants to look unbothered. Her mom looked at me like she was studying an exhibit. I didn't say anything, but later when I asked her what her mom meant, she said, "Why do you always take things so personally?" Then she kissed me like it was an apology and said, "Don't start making me choose sides." But the way her mom said "still with," it sounded like there have been other ones, or that I wasn't supposed to last this long. I keep noticing small things that don't add up. She changed her Instagram bio to learning detachment. She started turning her read receipts off, and every time I ask how her day was, she says, "Don't start interrogating me." But if I don't ask, she says, "You've stopped caring." She used to send me pictures of her coffee, her cat, her art projects. Now it's just quotes, weird vague ones like, "Sometimes love is a lesson, not a lifetime," or "The ones who never lie are the ones you should fear." I asked her who those were about. She said, "No one. Maybe me, maybe you." Then she smiled. I know I sound paranoid. I know how it sounds when guys say she changed. But it's not just mood swings, it's the gaps. Like she's leaving blank spaces on purpose, waiting for me to fill them wrong so she can prove her point. Example, we were supposed to meet last Friday. She texted me at 3 p.m., "Can we push it to later? I have to help my mom with something." So I said, "Sure, what time?" No reply. I called around 6, no answer. Then at 9, she texts, "You always assume the worst." I didn't even accuse her of anything. I just asked if she was okay. But suddenly I was acting like her dad and trying to control her schedule. Later that night, she said she fell asleep. The next morning, she posted a story at midnight with her friend's tagged location. When I brought it up, she said, "You really screenshot my story? That's so insecure." I didn't screenshot it, but now I wonder if she posted it for me to see. She has this phrase she uses when she wants to end arguments without apologizing. "You're missing the bigger picture." And every time she says it, it feels like she's talking to someone else in her head. Like there's another version of our relationship that I can't access, one where I'm the villain and she's just waiting for proof. The scariest part is, I've started believing her version might be right. Because I'm tired. I'm tired of trying to defend myself for crimes I don't understand. Last night we talked again, or tried to. I told her that calling me temporary really hurt, that it made me question everything. She said, "Maybe that's good for you." Good for me? Then she told me she's been journaling about patterns of attachment and that she has to observe people's behavior under pressure. Am I the experiment?
I didn't sleep that night. I lay there replaying her last message, recalibrating until the words stopped sounding like English. Around 3 a.m., I finally texted her, "Are we okay?" She didn't answer. She didn't even open it. By morning, I'd convinced myself I was being dramatic. She'd said she was recalibrating, not leaving. Maybe she just needed space. People need space, right? So I made coffee, scrolled through old pictures, tried to convince my body we were fine. But every photo looked staged now, like the happiness was photoshopped in afterwards. At noon, she finally texted, "Hey, can we not talk about heavy stuff today? I just want calm energy." No good morning, no reference to the night before, just a boundary dropped like a trapdoor. I said sure and left work early, bought her favorite snack, walked to her place like an idiot, hoping gestures still worked. When she opened the door, she looked normal. Messy bun, hoodie, sleepy eyes. She even smiled a little when she saw me. But the air felt wrong, thinner somehow, like we were actors stepping onto a set after the audience left. I tried to hug her and she hesitated, half a second too long. Then she said, "You smell like coffee. That's good." And just like that, we were pretending everything was fine. We watched a movie, or at least she did. I spent the whole time watching her reactions, searching for the old her and the way she laughed or sighed. Halfway through, she reached for my hand. I almost cried from relief. But then she said quietly, "You grip too hard sometimes." I froze. "Sorry," I said. She smiled without looking at me. "See, you always apologize before anyone accuses you." That stuck in my head like a splinter. Later, she asked if I could stay over. My chest unclenched. "Of course," I said. We lay in bed, and she started talking about dreams she'd had. Weird ones about me losing my phone, her trying to call, me not answering. She said she woke up crying. I told her I'd never ignore her calls. She said, "You did once." "When?" I asked. She turned over, pulling the blanket up. "It's fine, you probably don't remember." And that was it. A memory I couldn't access, used like evidence. Next morning, she was distant again. Made breakfast but didn't eat. Asked if I wanted to help her with errands, then got annoyed when I said yes. "I don't want to babysit. I was just offering to come along." "Yeah, that's the problem." She left me sitting at her table, toast untouched, and walked out. Around noon, she texted, "Don't wait up. Processing." I spent the day trying to work, but my mind kept looping, processing. What? When she finally came back that evening, she acted like nothing happened. Kissed my forehead, called me steady boy, and for 1 second, I believed we were back. Then she said, "You should write things down more. You forget details." I asked, "What details?" She said, "You'll see. It's starting to show." Over the next few days, things got quiet. Not peaceful quiet, clinical quiet. Every conversation had rules I didn't understand. If I asked too many questions, she'd sigh. If I didn't ask enough, she'd look disappointed. She started doing this thing where she'd say, "Remember what you said last week?" And I'd say, "About what?" She'd go, "Wow, okay." Then silence. Sometimes I wondered if she was confusing me with someone else. Other times I wondered if I was losing time somehow, forgetting entire pieces of our life. On Tuesday night, she called me crying, said she couldn't breathe. I drove to her place in 10 minutes flat. When I got there, she was calm, scrolling on her phone. "What happened?" I asked. She shrugged. "Panic attack. It's gone now." Then she said, "You didn't have to rush. I just needed to know if you still would." That sentence broke something in me. She'd tested me, and I passed. And somehow, that made me feel worse. A few nights later, we had dinner at mine. She looked through my phone while I was cooking. Not snooping, she said, just scrolling. Then she asked, "Who's Rachel?" I said, "Coworker." "Why?" She handed me the phone. "You liked her picture." I said, "It was a team photo." She said, "Interesting that you felt the need to explain." And suddenly I was on trial again. No evidence, no crime. After she left, I noticed she'd taken one of my hoodies. I texted her about it. She said, "Yeah, I needed something of yours. You can have it back when I trust you again." I didn't even ask what that meant. I just sat there holding my phone like it might explode. The pattern became clearer. She'd disappear for a day, come back sweeter than ever, then twist one sentence until it sounded like a confession. Sometimes she'd tell me stories about things I supposedly said. Small things like, "You once told me you'd leave if I got sick." I never said that. I'd remember something that cruel. But she said it so softly, with so much conviction, that I started wondering if maybe I joked once and forgotten. The human brain is terrifying when it wants to keep someone. Then came the journal. She said she'd started journaling to track her emotions. One night she read a page aloud. "Today he looked at me like I was a problem. He thinks he's starting to show his real self. She laughed afterwards, said, "Don't worry, it's just cathartic writing." But she kept the journal out on the table when I visited, open to different pages, each one mentioning me in a slightly worse light. I think she wanted me to see it. One evening, she said, "You should start journaling too." I said, "About what?" She said, "About how you make people feel." She was smiling when she said it, but her eyes weren't.
The longer this goes, the smaller my world gets. My friends keep asking why they never see her anymore. I tell them she's busy, overwhelmed. Truth is, she doesn't want them around. Says they influence my energy. So now it's just me and her moods, and her rules that change every hour. Last night I tried to talk seriously. Told her I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. She said, "That's because you know what you did." I asked, "What did I do?" She tilted her head, almost pitying. "If you have to ask, you're not ready to hear it." And I swear, for a second I thought I actually had done something terrible. The guilt hit before the logic. That's how deep it is now. After that night, I started recording our conversations. Not to spy, just to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. I never told her, obviously, but after 3 days, I stopped listening back, because hearing it didn't help. I'd replay the audio, and it sounded normal. No raised voices, no obvious manipulation. Just her calm, deliberate tone and me stumbling over words. But I could feel the distortion, like something invisible was missing. A word, a pause, an energy shift that didn't register on tape. It's like she edited reality in real time. On Friday, she came over and said, "Remember last week when you screamed at me?" I said, "What?" She said, "You raised your voice. You said I was impossible." I stared at her. "That never happened." She blinked. "Wow, okay, so we're doing that now." Doing what? The word "now" made it sound like a phase I'd entered, a diagnosis, not a disagreement. She walked into my kitchen, poured herself water, and said, "I forgive you." I said, "For what?" She said, "See, there it is again, the deflection." And just like that, I was guilty again. She started using therapy language like she'd studied me. Every argument became a diagnosis, projection, gaslighting, emotional immaturity. If I tried to explain, she'd cut me off with, "You're intellectualizing." If I stayed quiet, she'd say, "See, you shut down." Every move was wrong. Even breathing felt strategic. She said she wanted to reset our connection. No volumes, no distractions, just us. So I turned mine off and stayed at her place all weekend. She locked her door from the inside, said it made her feel safe. We cooked, watched old movies, played board games. For a moment, it almost felt normal. But then I noticed she'd started writing things down in her journal while looking at me. Not full sentences, just words like control, testing, avoidance. I asked what she was writing. She said, "I'm mapping you." Sunday night, she asked me to tell her 3 things I regret. I said, "About what?" She said, "Anything. Just prove you have self-awareness." So I told her some random stuff. Losing touch with an old friend, wasting time at a dead job, skipping a call from my mom before she got sick. She nodded. Interesting that none of those are about me. I said, "You asked for regrets, not..." She cut me off. "So you don't regret how you've treated me?" And suddenly, we were back in trial mode. Every sentence was evidence. Every silence was contempt. That night, she cried. Really cried, shaking shoulders, breathless sobs. I asked what was wrong, and she said, "You're erasing me." I said, "I'm right here." She said, "Physically, sure. Emotionally, gone." Then she fell asleep mid-tear, like she'd drained herself. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I had become distant, too careful, too muted, too small. When I got home the next morning, I realized she'd taken my house key. I called. She didn't answer. Texted, "Hey, did you take my key by mistake?" She replied, "No mistake. You'll get it back when you're stable." Stable. That word sat in my chest like a stone. The next week, weird things started happening. Texts disappearing, voicemails half deleted. She'd reference conversations I couldn't find in my phone. I thought maybe I'd deleted them during one of my insomnia nights. But then she'd show me screenshots, messages I didn't remember sending. One read, "You make me insane sometimes, but I can't stop coming back." It looked like me. Same typing style, punctuation, even the late-night timestamp. But I don't remember writing it. She said, "See? You admit it." I said, "That's not real." She said, "Wow. Total denial. This is sad." And the worst part?
She said it softly, like she pitied me. At work, people started noticing. My manager asked if everything was okay. I said, yeah, just tired. She said, you've been quiet lately, unfocused. I didn't have the heart to say I was spending half my nights defending my sanity to someone who spoke in riddles. One night, I tried to break up. I said, this isn't healthy. She said, you're right. I exhaled, relieved. Then she added, not for me. She looked at me like I was a problem she'd almost solved. Then she said, you don't actually love me. You love the version of me that doesn't exist. And before I could respond, she added, that's okay. I've been there too. It's trauma bonding. It felt less like a breakup and more like a diagnosis I hadn't consented to. I didn't see her for 3 days. When she finally texted, it was just a photo of my hoodie on her bed captioned, you left a part of you here. I said, can you drop it off? She said, no. Some things you don't get back. I stared at that message for an hour, not because of the hoodie, but because of the way she said it, like she meant my sanity. The next week, she showed up at my place unannounced, said she missed me. We talked for hours, soft voices, long silences. She cried again, said she'd been journaling, that she realized maybe she had been too clinical. She said she loved me, and for the first time in weeks, it sounded almost real. We fell asleep on my couch. When I woke up, she was gone. And so was my notebook, the one in which I'd been writing down everything that happened. She texted later, I took it because you were distorting things. It's safer with me. I just stared at the screen, shaking. She'd taken my version of events, literally. That's when I realized she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to control the narrative. And I think part of her genuinely believed it was for my own good. The terrifying thing is, she made me start believing it too. I don't remember the week after she took the notebook. Not clearly. Just flashes, her voice on speaker, my phone lighting up at 3 a.m., me walking into work late and pretending nothing was wrong. Every time I tried to write things down again, she'd somehow know. She'd text, stop obsessing, it's unhealthy.
Once she sent a photo of my desk from outside the window. I hadn't told her where I was that night. She said she was just checking in. I started screenshotting everything, her messages, call logs, timestamps. But a few days later, half of them were gone, like someone went into my phone and cleaned it out. I confronted her. She smiled and said, maybe your phone's trying to protect you from reliving trauma. I laughed, then realized she wasn't joking. Around that time, she added me to a new group chat. Me, her, 2 of her friends I barely knew. The chat name was Reality Check. The first message was from her. Let's all agree to keep things transparent from now on. One of the friends replied, yes, Queen, accountability era. It felt staged, like she'd been prepping them. They started asking concerned questions. So, have you been managing your anger lately? Are you still sleeping on the floor sometimes? Stuff I never told anyone. I typed, who told you that? Then watched the 3 dots flicker, disappear, come back. Finally, she replied, you did. Don't start rewriting again. I left the chat. 10 minutes later, she posted a screenshot in her story. Impossible to heal with someone who denies reality. No name, but everyone knew. People at work started acting weird. My coworker said, hey, everything okay with your girlfriend? She DM'd the company page asking if you were coming in. I didn't even know she knew the company handle. When I asked her why, she said, you weren't answering. I was worried you'd had another episode. Another. Like there'd been a first. Then came a party, her best friend's birthday. She begged me to go, so we needed a public reset. I almost didn't, but she showed up at my door with cupcakes and said, please, just tonight, act normal. So I went. Everyone smiled too hard. The music was low, like background noise for something else. Halfway through, someone passed around a phone showing a video, me apparently yelling in the street. Same jacket, same voice, but I don't remember it. She watched my face and whispered, see why I worry? I said, where did this come from? She said, someone sent it, maybe the universe. People laughed, awkward. I left early. Later that night, she texted, you made them uncomfortable. You need to start owning what you do. For 2 days, I couldn't eat. Then she sent me a voice note. Her voice was soft, careful. I think you're getting paranoid. You're starting to see patterns that aren't there. I'm scared for you. The next message was just breathing like she'd been crying or pretending to. I listened to it over and over until the timestamp said replayed 18x. She sent, see, obsessive. I tried to show my friend Liam the screenshots, but when I opened the chat, all the messages had changed. Same bubbles, different text. Mine said things I didn't remember writing. Apologies, confessions, random love quotes. Liam looked at me and said, dude, maybe you need sleep. And maybe he was right. The next night I dreamed she was sitting at the end of my bed flipping through my phone. When I woke up, the phone was on the floor, battery dead. There was a new note in my app. You can't delete me. No timestamp.
I called her. She answered instantly. Before I could speak, she said, "You shouldn't call me when you're half awake." I said, "How do you know I just woke up?" She said, "Because I heard you," then hung up. It got worse. Random people started liking my old photos. Friends of hers I'd never met. She posted a selfie captioned, "He's learning, proud of his progress." I hadn't spoken to her in 3 days. When I finally confronted her, she said, "Why do you think everything is about you?" Then smiled. And for a moment, I wasn't sure it wasn't about me.
I used to think love had a sound. Not the obvious one, not laughter, not sex, not the way someone says your name when they're happy you exist, but that low static hum that sits in the background when you think you're safe. That tiny constant signal of peace. And then one day, you wake up and realize the hum's been gone for a while, replaced by something sharper, colder, like the quiet before a fight you didn't agree to. That's what living with him started to feel like. An argument I hadn't been invited to but was somehow losing anyway. He'd say things like, "You've been weird lately," or "You're looking for problems that aren't there." And maybe he was right because I'd start doubting myself immediately. Was I weird? Was I making things up? Was I too sensitive again? But then I'd find little cracks. A call that went unanswered for 3 hours when I knew he wasn't working. A sweater that smelled like perfume I didn't wear. Messages on his lock screen that he'd swipe away so fast I'd wonder if I'd imagined them. Once I asked who R was, that same initial that had been popping up for weeks. And he looked at me with that disappointed face, the one that made me feel like I was 12 again, caught breaking something expensive. "You really think I'd cheat on you?" he said. And I didn't. Or maybe I did, but didn't want to find out. I remember apologizing even though I hadn't done anything wrong. After that, he got nicer. Too nice. He brought me breakfast in bed, played with my hair while we watched TV, saying good morning texts with too many hearts. I told my best friend about it, and she said, "That's how they reset you. Love bomb you back into silence." I laughed, but that word reset stuck because that's exactly what it felt like. Like he'd wiped the slate clean without asking me if I was ready to forgive him. Then things started disappearing. Small at first, a pair of earrings, one of my journals, a shirt I wore all the time. He'd say I misplaced them. I believed him until the night I found one of my missing notebooks in the trunk of his car, pages torn out, the rest soaked through with coffee. When I confronted him, he didn't get angry. He just sighed and said, "You're making everything harder than it needs to be." I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "Why?" And he just said, "Because you wouldn't understand." After that, the house got colder, the silence louder. He'd move through the rooms like a ghost I used to know. Sometimes he'd talk in his sleep, muttering names I didn't recognize. Sometimes he'd stare at me too long like he was waiting for me to break first. And maybe I did. One night I left my phone recording on the kitchen counter after he went out. When he came back, I heard him talking to someone. Not on the phone, but like he was standing there with them. I replayed it over and over, trying to decode the words, but all I caught was laughter. Female. Low. Familiar. I told myself it could have been the TV. It could have been anything. But when I checked the door camera, there was a gap in the footage. 3 full hours missing. He said the system must have glitched. I said maybe, but I stopped sleeping that week. The last straw came when I found a note under my pillow. Just one line, written in his handwriting. "You shouldn't look for things you don't want to find." I don't remember sleeping after that, just pacing, counting the hours until sunrise, checking the locks twice, 3 times. And when he finally woke up, he acted like nothing was wrong, made coffee, kissed my forehead, asked if I wanted to go out for brunch. I said yes, because saying no felt dangerous.
That brunch felt like a play. We sat outside under one of those umbrellas that flaps in the wind, pretending to be a normal couple. He ordered for me, like always, smiled at the waitress, said she'll have the usual, even though we'd never been there before. I remember thinking, does he rehearse this? Does he believe it? Because his voice was so calm, his hands so steady, his smile so ordinary. The kind of smile you'd trust if you didn't know what it was hiding. He talked about plans, weekend trips, maybe buying a dog, and I kept nodding, but in my head I was replaying that note. You shouldn't look for things you don't want to find, like it was a curse that had already worked. When we got home, I pretended to nap. He went into his office, the one I was not supposed to clean because it was for work stuff. I waited until his shower started before I went in. The first thing I noticed was the smell, my perfume, the one that had gone missing. The second thing was the box under his desk. Inside were the torn pages from my notebook, photos of us, receipts from hotels we'd never stayed in, and a small velvet pouch that wasn't mine. Inside was a silver ring, women's size. I didn't have time to process it because the water stopped. I barely shoved everything back before he walked in, towel around his waist, that same unreadable expression on his face. "What are you doing in here?" I froze, said something about looking for tape. He didn't move, just watched me until I felt my pulse in my throat. Then, softly,
You shouldn't go through my things. It wasn't a shout, it was worse, it was calm, rehearsed, like he'd been waiting to say it again. That night, he hid his phone under his pillow. I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how easily he could make me disappear, socially, emotionally, maybe even literally. Because everyone thought he was perfect. My friends loved him. My family called him the stable one. So I started pretending too. I laughed at his jokes, I let him hold me. I acted like everything was fine while inside I was packing, mentally first, then literally. The plan was simple. Wait for his next overnight trip, leave quietly, no confrontation, no goodbye. But 2 nights before he was supposed to leave, I got a text from an unknown number. No message, just a photo of me, asleep, taken from the doorway. I couldn't breathe. I showed it to him shaking. He looked at it, then at me and said, "You probably took that yourself." And that was the moment I knew. Not because it was the worst thing he'd said, but because of how easy it was for him, how practiced the denial sounded, like he'd rewritten my reality so many times that he didn't even need to think anymore. So I waited until he fell asleep that night, grabbed my bag, my passport, the cash I'd been hiding inside a vitamin bottle, and walked out. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my keys twice. I didn't even take my phone, just left it charging on the nightstand like bait. I drove until the sky started to lighten, until the panic softened into exhaustion. I booked a motel under a fake name and slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, I checked my email. There was one unread message, from him. Subject line, "You forgot something." No text, just an attachment. It was a photo of the ring, the one from the velvet pouch, sitting on my pillow.